Welcome to Drinks Coach. It's another day in the sofa. Lowercase Vinesack or lowercase Drinks Coach UK. Please interface with me on the multi-web through Twitter or Instagram, or follow me on Facebook. Of course, you're watching YouTube, so please hit the bell to subscribe. I'd love to get my subscriptions up to 1,000 by the end of the year. That'd be really nice. It's been a long old haul the last couple of years, and I haven't gone around the normal business of trying to get random followers. I want the followers to count, so I do delete an awful lot of followers that look a bit too young for me from Nigeria. So usually the people that are in my subscription are people that actually enjoy wine and engaging. So here we have a range of wines which I'm doing because we're getting quite close to Christmas now, and I've realised there are some phenomenal bargains to be had out there, and some of these bargains might come offline very, very soon. And I'm particularly speaking about this, which is Waitrose's annual promotion of 10 wines for a tenner, which has in the past thrown up some really spectacular wines. But also, I think, if I'm really honest with you, I think some years a little bit slack. I mean, I've gone, well, actually, these aren't wines that I want to drink anyway. But that might be just personal preference, not always. But I think this year they've really excelled themselves. The buying team at Waitrose has never been more fuerte. They're doing an amazing job. And I want to show you my favourite 5 of the 10 wines they're promoting. And this is something you can crack on with, because I think halfway through next week, around the 14th of December, this promotion stops. But if you want to buy some incredibly good wines for a vast discount for the Christmas period, here's my choice from Waitrose this year. When I say a vast discount, these wines are all being sold for 10 quid. But would normally retail around the £15 to £18 ballpark. So they're considerably more than a third off, in some cases almost half off. And look what they've got you this year. We've got some delicious wines, and there's some wines that I haven't picked that may have been more up your style. Knowing me, being an old git, I tend to go for the more classic European styles of wine, which I've done here. But there are some lovely Aussie stuff and Chilean things and whatever, if you like that sort of thing. So here we are with Gavi. Gavi is a Denominazione Origine Controllata a Garantita. In fact, it's the first white wine region, certainly still white wine region, in the whole of Italy to achieve the top DOCG status. And that happened quite a long time ago. If I remember, I think it was 1990. Could have been earlier than that. But having said that, Gavi is made from a great variety, which in lesser hands can be a bit lackluster. It's a great variety called Cortesi del Piemonte, and Cortesi can taste in its simplest form really quite delicious and refreshing, but nothing spectacular. It's lovely and sherbety and fresh. It's like an apple teeny. It's really quite nice. But this is Broglia. Broglia know what they're doing, and this is proper Gavi. You've got Gavi di Gavi, which I think is supposed to be some indication that comes much closer from where the centre of Gavi is in terms of vineyard space. And also there is a producer called La Sculca, who are allowed to call their wine Gavi di Gavi, D-E-I, which I assume means Gavi, God of Gavi. So La Sculca is one of the most magical and interesting white wines in the whole of Europe. And I thought people think it's overrated. I don't at all. I think it's highly underrated. And you can see on the reputations of just one producer, La Sculca, how a whole region got given an upgrade status to, at the time, this is the finest white wine region in Italy, which that's what they obviously clearly thought. La Sculca also makes sparkling wine, which is very, very old. It's been aged for many, many years, 15, 20 years on lees from Cortesi, and it makes a wine which is effortlessly champagne quality plus. So let's start with this. This is the Gavi. Like I said, a tenner, right? Well, you can buy Gavi for 6 or 7 quid, but you'll find 2 things. First of all, it's boring and a bit rubbish, and secondly, you'll find they're quite sweet. Residual sugars of 7, 8, 9, 10. It was kind of it's an Italian riposte to New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, which I haven't got a problem with, but those wines are nothing more than party pop, which I'm fine with. But when you have a really, really good Cortese, it's been looked after, maybe aged on the lees for a little while, which means the dead yeast cells in the tank settle to the bottom and leave the wine on it for a while, you can actually achieve something a little bit greater than that. So here we are. Broglia Gavi 2020. 2020 appears to be a very nice white wine vintage in the north of Italy, by and large. 1919 was very warm, made some lovely wine in its own right, but more of a red wine vintage, I think. So there we go. Got some colour to it, which is always I'm always enthusiastic about. The colour is an indication that some development has happened in the wine, which can only mean more interesting flavours. The first thing it smells like is it reminds me of something quite saline, almost like standing at the beach. Not dirty like kelp, but sort of a balmy, salty sensation on the tongue. It's got a lovely kernely, like uncooked white kernel almond flavour, like orgeat syrup, if you know what that is, from France, which is a kind of a syrup made from crushed almonds. It's not cherry stone like. I mean, it's more kind of beany. There are other white wines like this in Italy. In fact, this wine, if I taste it blind, I might have been surprised that it wasn't a Vernaccia di San Gimignano, which is one of the most prestigious and oldest white wines made quite near to Rome, and it has this kind of bitter almond twang to it, which is rather attractive, I think. This is 13.5% alcohol, not mucking about, clearly bone dry. What does it go with? I mean, literally anything. Crustacean. Oysters, yes. Prawns, cold prawns with mayonnaise. All those kind of like handout, glamorous, more expensive Christmas sort of pre-dinner goodies that you might get handed to you at a party. They'd be perfect with this. And what I love about it is its dryness. It would be lovely with salmon, smoked salmon. Anything with cream cheese in. It's a bit of a winner, that. I like that. That's a really, really nice, clean wine. Very pristine. And I think for 10 quid is considerably better value money than most Chablis at the moment, which is becoming very, very expensive. Next to this, I've picked a rosé. It's from Stephen Cronk. Howdy doody, Stephen and his lovely wife and family, who I've yet to visit. I would like to one day very soon. Beautiful packaging. We all know how pretty Provence rosé bottles are now, and I think the packaging is as important in rosé as it is in champagne, really. I think it really sets the thing apart. If it's in an ugly bottle, why buy it? Buy one in a pretty bottle. There's some beautiful packaging out there. And this is called Pure Mirabeau 2020 Côte de Provence. I think 2020 again, very solid vintage for Provence Rosé. Provence Rosé has lovely acidity, more acidity than the 19s, slightly less extract, but has this wonderful lift and perfume. And the thing about Provence Rosé, which I think has captured the zeitgeist of English drinkers, because they're not cheap normally, right? It's a $15.99 wine dropped down to a tenner. Is the ephemeral nature of the wine. When I pour myself a little drop, let's have a look here. I mean, the colour almost implies it's barely there, right? It's kind of like, it's almost like a shadow of a wine. Very, very pale. It's got a lovely, what the French refer to as pelure d'oignon, or onion skin colour, so flesh tones. And it's almost like, you blink and you'd miss it. It's got a very light, peachy, almost pink candy floss, lifted aroma, hint of definite yellow peach or nectarine. Oh, I love nectarines, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like these wines, particularly in this part of the Provence. Very pure, very clean, but it appears to have no edges. I think I did quite a lot on Provence rosés when I first started this channel, because Côte de Provence were very generous with their samples, and I had to use something. This is going back a couple of years now, to episode 5 or 6. But here I am picking one out on purpose. I think that wine's absolutely delicious. It's probably got an easy another 6 months to go. So whatever you didn't drink this Christmas will be fine right up until the sun starts coming out again, and we start drinking along with our asparagus and everything else again in spring. But a tenner, you'd be very hard pushed to find a better rosé anywhere in the world than that. Thank you, the Cronks. Okay, and they've always been very loyal to Waitrose, and I think if you go into Waitrose Cellar, you can buy some of their more premium offerings. But why would you if this is $9.99 or whatever it is? Okay, so now we've got 2 reds to follow up on. Wowee! I mean, and what reds they are. I mean, this wine is it's historically a very important wine because Crozes-Hermitage is an area around the Tain, Tain, or hill of Hermitage, which is the very first place anywhere where Shiraz, or actually Syrah, as obviously the French name for it, was ever planted with the intention of growing grapes and making wine. In fact, the grapes were brought back through one of the Crusades by a particular hermit, who then built a church on top of the hill and lived there for the rest of his days, obviously suffering from shell shock and battle shock from seeing the horrors that he saw during the Crusades. Can't have been pretty. But he brought back this grape from a town called Shiraz in latter-day Persia, now Iran, and that's Syrah. Okay. And Crozes-Hermitage is the vineyards that kind of spilt when they planted the whole hill. They started to plant vineyards in that slightly larger area, probably I would say 4 or 5 times the size of the Hermitage surface area. And there's a Cave cooperative. That is a company where lots of growers, let's say 200 or 300 growers, get together and say, look, we know how to grow grapes, we don't know how to make wine, so they appoint a grower, a winemaker, somebody who's particularly skilled. They club together to pay for their own facilities, a cooperative facility where all the grapes are sent to be pressed and analysed and so forth, and then put together into a wine or a brand. And Tain-l'Hermitage, Cave Tain-l'Hermitage, it has always been considered one of the very, very finest examples of this agreement working well. And I remember when I started buying wine when I was at Waitrose and Sainsbury's back in the day. We're going back to the mid-90s now. Everyone said, oh, Tain-l'Hermitage, one of the greatest co-ops in the world. And I used to drink the wines and go, not feeling it. Not so much. I mean, I still want to drink. I'd rather drink the wines from local growers. And there was an embarrassment of delicious wines, particularly from places like the Crozes-Hermitage, which had just come on stream, which were just divine wines. Now, having said that, in the last 6 or 7 years, there's been an inexorable increase in quality of the wines at Tain-l'Hermitage, and the prices have gone up slightly, but they still offer incredible value for money. So this is like the original, the OG Syrah from France, and it tips a hat to Syrah grown next door 1,000 years ago. Okay, now, this is 2019, wonderfully warm, silky vintage, and not like Australian Shiraz, Crozes Syrah tends to be picked because there's a very strong diurnal temperature variation. There's a lot of hills, so they get a lot of cold air at night coming down the hills, what we call cold air drainage, which means the wines aren't 15% alcohol, they aren't low in acid, they aren't big beasts slathered in oak. It's almost the polar opposite. You've got wines which have 12.5%, 13% alcohol, maybe a little bit more than that, but in extreme years like this, it's probably much higher. This is 14%, which is an unusual year. But they have this refreshment, this lovely zingy acidity, this brightness. It's like eating a mound of perfectly ripe plums, and you get that tang, and your mouth goes all funny. It's absolutely delicious. They're not slathered in oak either, and I don't know, I think it can be one of the most amazing value wines in the world. And wine as humble as this is basically just called Cave de Tain-l'Hermitage, Crozes-Hermitage, Grande Classique, which is a $15.99 wine in Waitrose normally. Tenner, remember? Tenner until this time next week. Hurry up and buy it. Beautiful colour. Lovely colour of Syrah. Syrah's always got a beautiful, impressive, almost blue, purple colour to it. Purple, vermilion, I think would be a nice lyrical word for that kind of red. Oh, God, it's so good. So good. For a tenner, oh my God, this is, smells of, almost has a smell of hard to say it without putting you off. It's like iron, almost. It smells, you can smell the soil. It's got rich, rusty, brown soils underneath this beautiful, almost cocoa powdered, chocolatey cherry fruit. And as soon as it's there, it's gone away. And it's left with this perfect, pristine, clean image of itself behind. And it's not heavy in any way. It's delightfully light. Comes in a beautiful bottle. Looks very grown up. What would you eat with this? I'm not sure it goes with roast turkey, but it'd be brilliant with something like roast goose or roast duck, or if you're having a joint, maybe a New Year's Eve joint or something like this would be absolutely fantastic. You've had a party of 10 or 12 people, you bought 3 bottles of this, people will feel very, very treated and flattered that you went to the effort. But I think it'd be very hard to find a better example of European Syrah anywhere in the world for less than a tenner. And this is a nice drink. So we're going to go on to the last one. I'm not sure if this is a wine bought by my friend Daphne, very talented buyer, as are all of the buyers, Hi Vix and all the other people, lovely people out in Waitrose land. But she had a baby. And I'm not sure whether she was away when this wine was selected, or this is one of the wines she selected before going on maternity leave. But this is Raze Beauvallet. It's a Cru Bourgeois claret. So it comes from the Medoc, which is the bit that sticks up from Bordeaux. It's where most of the expensive posh stuff comes from. And it's 2015, which was a fantastic vintage. For lesser wines that didn't have quite the aspect of the Grand Crus, 2015 was a stonker because it was reliably warm. Had a lovely ripe fruit. The tannins are ripe. It reminds me very much back in the day, if people are watching this and this means anything to them at all, of 1985, when I was too young to drink. And 85 was the first really great Bordeaux vintage that I drank. And it was not, I think, by any stretch of imagination, given 5 stars when it was first released. But I think we're all kind of laughing outside of our face now because 1985s are still beautifully plump and ripe, but still drinking gorgeously. I refer to wines like Lange 85, which is wonderful, or Aubryon 85. I mean, there's some incredible wines. Still the life and soul of the party, and these things are 40 years old. Okay, so this is a bottle of claret. Okay, I don't know what it would cost before, but I wouldn't expect that to cost any less than 17 or 18 pounds a bottle, maybe even 20. But this is £9.99. So, being from the Medoc, it will probably have quite a high proportion of Cabernet, but also, in order to allow the wine to be drunk relatively young, more and more Merlot is being planted. Although, with global warming, etc., it's now getting almost too warm to plant Merlot in Bordeaux. But this has got bits and bobs of other things in it. Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, whatever. But it's a Bordeaux blend. 2015, I'm very excited about trying this because very few 2015s have disappointed. Oh, sorry, I've got a bit of from breakfast probably. Right, nice colour. Not opaque, not so black you can't see through it, which is a positive for me. It just smells like claret. What's claret supposed to smell like? Well, it's supposed to smell like this. It's supposed to smell, in the first instance, of a wonderful, really ripe, plummy, damsony, juicy fruit note, followed then by the smell of almost like a brand new leather suede coat. There's a touch of leatheriness, or the smell of an unlit cigar. It's kind of like an earthy, warm, spicy smell. Then there's the smell of the oak, which is kind of more chocolate, hint of vanilla. And there's a classic tasting note from Medoc Reds, which is when you sharpen a pencil, the smell of pencil shavings, or what the French refer to as goût de capsule, which was the old metal on the top used to be made from lead that was extruded, but that became illegal, I think, back in 1992 because lead pellicules were falling in the bottle, and people were actually, if they drank enough wine, getting lead poisoning from it. So these are now made from aluminium and other alloys, or plastic even. But the taste of an old the smell of an old capsule that started to corrode slightly smelled a little bit like that. So, oh wow, that's a lot of wine for a tenner. That's a lot of wine. Completely ready to drink, still got some firm tannin, absolutely perfect with a leg of lamb, maybe a hogget at this time of year with some Hasselback potatoes and a lime jus with rosemary. Absolutely fantastic. Or, in fact, just a couple of slices of the most beautiful Comté you can afford. Great with cheeses, too. So this is the kind of red wine which you can have with dinner, or maybe even crack open at the end of dinner to go with cheese, or, furthermore, have a glass in front of the Bond. Delicious. I'm surprised I'm making this show go on as long as it is, but I'm clearly enjoying these wines. They're really surprising me. Wow. Okay, last. Now, I featured this last year. There's a company called Sogo Vinhos. Sogo Vinhos is the largest holder of port in the whole of Portugal. Port being the fortified wine, which is held on the south bank in a place called Gaia. And the north bank is called Oporto, or the port, and the south bank is Vila Nova, New Town or Newcastle, de Gaia, and they've got these lodges that go all the way up the side of the hill. There's an iconic iron bridge, most extraordinary railway bridge, which crosses the Douro right at the mouth of the Atlantic. And if you're on the south side of that, you can just see one shed after another. And this is where Feuerherd, Kopke, Barros, and lots of houses all coexist together. And this is Kopke. It comes in an unusual bottle, very identifiable. And this is a typical thing to do. They used to stencil on to the bottle, certainly the vintage or something like that, so you can actually see it before they actually put the label on. But they made this into a design feature and just decided to just stencil on the entire label. So that's just sprayed on with paint. It looks very fetching. This is a reserve Tawny. Now, Tawny port compared to Ruby port. Ruby port is a wine that's made where they get the grapes, they crush them, you stand in them, actually tread in them. Still, traditionally, that's still not uncommon. And then they add brandy to it. So the sugar that's in the fermentation is preserved. And the wine only gets to 1% alcohol before the brandy goes in. But the brandy goes in up to about 20% alcohol. 19.5% is typical. And you end up with a wine which is very sweet. But actually, it's not really a wine, is it? It's more like grapes preserved in vodka. It's like those little jars of prunes in Armagnac that you buy at the airport because you've forgotten to buy your wife a present. Not personal experience. So this is an example of a really, really good port made by a house that specialises specifically in what it says on the front, which is Tawny. Now, a Ruby port is a port that's either been made without any oak contact whatsoever, but if it goes up to the pinnacle of what Ruby port produces, which is vintage port, it's allowed to be aged in pipes, which are large barrels, for up to 2 years. Then they have to be yanked out and put into a bottle, then they're aged for decades, if not centuries, in a cellar somewhere. Tawny port is a much more exciting option at the lower end because they leave the wine in the barrel, so the wine has more oxygen. It gets more of a developed colour quicker, which is always a very good sign because, as I said at the beginning of this piece, the more development in colour, the more likely there is going to be interesting flavours. And this wine has been probably 6 or 7 years in a pipe port. Port pipe. So this is almost like a 10-year-old Tawny, effectively. 10-year-old Tawny, that's a £25 wine, isn't it? If you buy a really good one from Dow or from War or the really famous guys. But these guys specialise in Tawny port, and this cheeky monkey is only a tenner. So we go. Beautiful colour. You can see that actually that wine has been worn by air. You can see that. What colour is that? It's Tawny. That's where it gets its name from. That's right. Okay, so. This happened last year. The smell of my first port of Christmas. It's all downhill from here. Emma, hide my car licence. I shouldn't drive. Not until January the 10th. Okay. Kopke Reserve Tawny. $9.99. It's probably going to be stacked up high as you walk into every Waitrose this Christmas. I've got to tell you, if you like port and you want something with a bit of class and you're a bit deep-pocketed, you don't have much money, it doesn't get any better than this. I promise you it doesn't. There you go. So, my 5 at a tenner for Christmas. You've got a week to go and buy them. Gavi Broglia, absolutely delicious. Bone dry, lovely savoury notes, lovely saline notes. Amazing with any kind of shellfish you can imagine. Great with squid, I imagine. We've got the lovely Mirabeau Rosé, which it's Provence Rosé, but it's £6 off. And then we've got this incredible wine, which I really think is, considering the history behind the wine, it's a bargain of the century. Maybe the century, maybe the decade. Maybe this is the bargain of the century. But this is a 2015 6-year-old ready to drink Cru Bourgeois Bordeaux, and it's giving you everything that claret gives you once you've let it rest and aged long enough. What can I say? And then you've even got this as your bomb at the end of the evening to knock out the granny, so you can stick on another film in the front room. Happy Christmas. See you next time.